To start, thank you so much for taking some time out of your day. Tell me, what do you think about NOAA's forecast for this year? Is it kind of on par with the atmospheric conditions that we've got going on?
Yeah, I'm not surprised at all that they went with above average. We've had a lot of above average seasons, and often we look at El Nino or La Nina as the driving factor. This year, we don't have either of those. It's more of a neutral year coming off of La Nina. But what we do have for sure are sea surface temperatures that are warmer than average in the Atlantic basin. We've got the weak wind shear that's anticipated. That's a big factor because wind shear is the thing that can cut down the tops of hurricanes. And then an active West African monsoon that is also predicted. So I think that combination of things and just the kind of trend we have seen in years past, the forecast of above average certainly doesn't surprise me. One other thing I like to add and remind everyone, we've had plenty of times where we have average seasons or even below average seasons, but they're memorable because all you need is one landfall. Take 2022. You'd think Hurricane Ian, you'll remember that as, oh, that was a big season. And it really wasn't when it comes to the seasonal outlook and what it meant if you look at the whole Atlantic basin. But we all remember it, and it was deadly because it was so bad in Florida. So that was a year where we had 14 named storms, about average. So an average year or even just slightly above average year can be highly impactful with just one landfall.
A lot of the work you do, which I really enjoy watching, is talking about climate change and those impacts in our day-to-day life. Can you talk a little bit? Are we seeing the fingerprints of climate change in our hurricane seasons?
So hurricane seasons, and for the last 5 years or so, the science has really shown this interesting sliding doors thing where we have reduced the amount of air pollutants, and that has allowed more heat in. And in turn, what that's done is actually, and will in future, reduce the overall number of hurricanes. But when they do form and when they're able to break through and become that convection that starts a hurricane, well, then they can take off because all of the rest of the warmth is in that ocean. As we know, that is the fuel. So it's what we look forward to is fewer hurricanes overall, but much stronger when they do form.
Yeah. We have obviously here in North Carolina been impacted really hard by Helene last year. Do you have any advice or words of wisdom to our community? Because I think we're still, actively recovering, especially out in the mountains right now.
No question. And that's something that takes years. I've done all the big ones from Katrina on, and here we are on the 20th anniversary of Katrina. And I still have kind of Katrina pen pals that I've kept in touch with. It doesn't just get better, right? Like it, of course, over time, much like grief of anything or trauma, there is healing that happens, but it is something that's going to be with you forever. I think where we need to work on this is that a lot of times people just outside the zone that had the worst impacts, they will pretty quickly, within a few years, get what we like to call kind of sandy amnesia, for example, or they'll forget fully, or kind of maybe it's a defense mechanism, be like, well, that didn't happen. So we'll see that in real estate. We'll see people start to build back in places that perhaps hasn't really, maybe doesn't make a lot of sense to do so. I think the most important thing is a reminder that sometimes it's every century, which is what happened, right? And people weren't living in 1916, and that's why those mountains didn't remember. That was two tropical systems back to back, much like the situation with Helene. You wouldn't expect them to remember. So I think paying attention to our history, remembering that it can be back to back, it can be year after year, but it also can take another century for something like that to happen, and to just not have amnesia and to just be really in tune and understanding that it is, and the communication is on us, right? It's how do we communicate and make sure everybody gets that communication? Because it wasn't that the warnings weren't there, it was that that wasn't communicated fully. A lot of people didn't have that information, which is wild because in our world, we're like, what? But, and I can make an analogy. I mean, as much as I'm walking to my child's baseball game with, this is a very small analogy, but I walk over, I know we have showers in the forecast. I can feel it in the air. I'm a meteorologist. I have a radar with me. So I know to bring an umbrella to my child's baseball game. I'm looking at the full stands of all the rest of the parents. Nobody has an umbrella. And as the skies darken, nobody's even kind of reacting. And I look over and I know we're going to get heavy rain. And I say to them, hey, we're going to get heavy rain. And they all go, oh, okay. And it's like almost like disbelief of it won't happen to us or it won't happen to me. The heavy rain starts and they're like, wow, you're really good at this. Yes. So I think in that way, to be able to communicate clearly, get that information to people, and then this is the big one, and this is where we have to change socially, is to make it okay for people to find help and then to help them get help. Because a lot of times people have to work the night before a big storm. And like, where are they going to go? Where were those people supposed to go? Were they supposed to drive 2 hours away from the mountainside so that they could be where? And stay with what money in what hotel? So can we find ways to do the rescue before the rescue? That's something else that I think ahead of this hurricane season we need to be very serious about.
Yeah, and that's obviously going to be like an evolving process to figure out what works and what doesn't work.
Yeah, because the
Um,
science has gotten so good. That's the wild part is like it's very hard on this side to watch where we were talking for 5 days before saying Appalachia is going to have catastrophic flash flooding. And then to have people say they did not know that catastrophic flash flooding was coming was really upsetting. So that needs to be mended. And I hope that we can make that happen.
Now, when it comes to communications, we've been hearing a lot about changes to NOAA and the forecast process. Can you talk a little bit about could we see impacts from changes to government in our forecasting as we go on into the summer?
For sure. There was a study done even before the federal cuts that showed that the hurricane hunters were one illness away, meaning that the staffing shortages were so bad, they were one illness away from not operating. So they were already at a really difficult place. That plus the age of the airplanes, many of them that they're using, two of them, are from the 1970s. So they break down often. They need maintenance all the time. And so we were already seeing some missions not being able to be flown. If you put all of that together, now add extra staffing cuts, reduce the number of observations we're taking from other staffing issues at Weather Service offices, yes, I think we will see impacts because we were already struggling. Also, and just to add maybe some silver lining, there are some private companies that were contracted by NOAA prior, a company called Windborne that is using kind of different types of weather balloons that actually can stay up for long periods of time and for 7 days to almost a month, and they can fly around storms. I'm hoping that a private sector steps in and helps us out because if we have less hurricane hunters, our forecast will be worse. If we have fewer missions, your forecast will be worse. It's that the formula is very easy and it's not one we want to see come true.
Is there anything else you might want people of the Carolinas to know as we go on into this hurricane season and, potentially another active one?
Yeah, I think we've watched hurricane forecasts become significantly better in the last 2 decades. I can run numbers for you, but I'll just tell you that even like accuracy of pointing where the landfall would be has been 75% more accurate in the last 2 decades. Like that's considerable, right? We're getting real good at where it's going to go. The intensity has come along a little slower, like because a lot of times it will rapidly intensify beforehand. And that's where I think it's important for people to pay attention day by day. A lot of times we see prior to a big holiday weekend, a lot of, Labor Day is a big one where a hurricane will be coming and people will be like, yeah, yeah, I saw the forecast. Well, 4 days later, it's going to look a lot different. So staying up on that communication because the information is out there, having the personal responsibility of knowing that you have to stay and that there will be small changes along the way, and then knowing what to do, right? Everybody always talks about, oh, it's hurricane season, get your plan together. Have you done it? Like I question that, and I talk to my kids about it because they do it at school all the time. They have their fire drills, they have their active shooter drills, they've got everything that they prepare for. I don't know that all of us do that at home. And so, what do we do when there's a fire? What do we do when there's a hurricane? And I think talking about that and knowing in the worst case scenario what your plan is, where your documents exist, what the insurance number is, and where you're going to be having that form of finding all of that, you can do yourselves a lot of favors now before the storms come.
Investing in flood insurance now would be a great idea.
Yeah, well, that too. And that's going to be the hard part, right? Because I think insurance companies have gotten really smart and they have the information and they know that change is happening. And so they know that those things are evolving and rapidly. So being able to, yes, get ahead of that if you can, and then know what you're going to do if it happened to happen to you. Where are you going to stay? Do you have a family member that would take you in and that you could run your life from? Because it is not just disruptive for that week or that month, it can be for years. And so having that plan, it sounds so grave and it sounds so like but if you don't do that, right, then you're going to be coming out of that with a lot less plan and a lot less. And that we always say don't be scared, be prepared. And like that is what we're talking about here. I think just having that plan in place will make everybody sleep better at night.
Well, Ginger Zee, thank you so much for providing us some of your insight. And of course, we'll be following along with you this season as I love seeing you out and about in all the storms and stuff and kind of covering things as they're coming. So thank
I
you.
hope I don't see you this season. That would
Yes,
be
I hope so
ideal.
too.